Hey, I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. Welcome to a podcast of Bridges Live. And this is part two of the Black Male Mentoring Conversation. The first one, you probably, if you see it, got mixed up and jumbled. So I want to re-record this for you for your pleasure. If you have any questions or comments, please contact Dr. Paul at holisticscience.com. But, we like to have conversations with things in that we care about, I care about, and things to listen to hope you give you a different perspective. Remember, Bridges Live is always about giving information, creating an understanding, and hopefully put you into an action. But without further ado, here is the rest of the conversation of Black Male Mentoring Conversation.
Of the black male educators in the public school system.
Yes, sir.
So our voice isn't there. Secondly, where else is our voice heard? Our voice is heard in hip-hop, right? So the voices that are being heard in hip-hop, which is almost ministry, because every rapper actually has a ministry, and what they're preaching is not what we want our young black males to hear at this moment. And then we have our athletes who have their ministry, and what they're preaching is not what we want, the majority of them, rather, what they're preaching is not what we want our young black males to hear. So me as a cybersecurity engineer, where am I going to be heard? My voice should be heard, but where is it going to be heard? And that's kind of why I launched Mission Fulfilled, because I felt the need that, okay, black males aren't in school. We have our athletes, but their voice is kind of not what we would preach, right? And then we have hip hop, which is counter to what we would preach. So in order for us to kind of get in front of these black males, we got to be in the schools. So another thing that I launched in with Mission Fulfilled is the Tech School for Black Boys. And what the Tech School for Black Boys is going to be black males teaching black boys what they know.
Man, that's amazing because, a lot of the time... Go ahead, Dr. White, go ahead. But real quick, but a lot of the times what you said is so spot on, and like we've said this before, the narrative has to be changed. Somehow we got to change the narrative, and we cannot change the narrative if we're sitting in our homes, driving around in our luxury cars because now we afford it. We can't do anything.
And listen, Dr. Dyer, not sure if I just want to say you're absolutely spot on with that. That's all I wanted to say is that this new anthology, When Men Lean In, it changes the narrative of who we are in this book. Each author, and can you all still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because Dr. Dyer's frozen on me, but the bottom line, you're absolutely 100% correct. All of us, whether it be in the classroom, the courtroom, on the baseball field, we have to use our platform to change that narrative. This book, When Men Lean In, We All Win, changes the narrative of the African-American male that's depicted on the 6 o'clock news as a negative a person that they want to see. So I want to just throw this over to Wes just to say the national slogan for the 100 Black Men is, what they see is what they'll be. What do they see? And I encourage everybody on this call, as Brother Gerald said, your business should be your ministry, and use that platform, whether it be coaching, teaching, books, to change the narrative. And that's why I wrote this book, so people can get a clear picture of some successful black men that are positive role models in corporate America, in the classroom, and at home as well. That's my truth there. Amen?
Amen.
I don't know if he's froze or not, but I'll chime in if brothers can hear me.
Yeah.
One of the things in my ministry, since we're calling it a ministry, my mission, my passion, in terms of teaching life insurance as a specific area of interest, what I found out is the whole aging process is the same. It was the same for our grandparents, same for our parents. It will be the same for young men and young ladies. The idea around that is what I call generational overlap. At some point, I used to hear my grandfather tell me, things that I really didn't listen to, but I heard it. But now it's permeating in my brain now that he's no longer here. We have to create that generational overlap where we're actually listening to these young folks teach us a little bit about what they know, because they're moving at a much faster pace than we move technologically. And they're moving at a much faster pace because there's so many more distractions that are global in their hand, a palm of their hands. We give them a utility called a cell phone at a very early age. So I'm listening to young people, but they're also listening to me, because to parse some of those distractions, I'm able to give them some commonsensical ideas that I know is going to be affecting them as they become in their 40s and 50s, that I heard, but was listening to from the older generation. Well, nothing has changed about life. We just have to continue to, we got to continue to reach back. They may not hear us, but they're listening. What's going on in the world that they're going to experience when they become 40s and 50s with families and lots of assets and things that are going on in their lives, because they're going to be the people that I'm going to rely on when I'm in my 70s and 80s. So nothing's changed. We just got to continue to fight that narrative that, they're not listening to us, because they're listening to us and they're watching us. So that's my point and what I've learned.
So Stephen, I agree with you, right? So the technological advances with our young people is far beyond how any of us grew up. Like most of us on this call, when we got to college or wherever we was going, the internet wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? So I have young people in my house. The problem with them, immediate gratification. Everything has to be immediate.
Exactly.
So for us, we grew up where our parents and grandparents talked about work ethic and this period of time where if you worked hard enough, then you could. Well, these kids, I worked on it for 2 days and ain't nothing happened. So the ability to have everything at your access in relation to your cell phone and the technology that you have has fostered this immediate gratification, which really doesn't exist. So when you talk about, even in the insurance realm, there's you sow a seed, and at some point in time you have a harvest. Well, if you sow that seed on rocks, you ain't never gonna have no harvest. And I think our young people don't understand that, there's this maturation point where if you do things over a period of time, then there will be success, because everything they see in their handheld device is immediate success, right? And which is false. Like it doesn't exist. So trying to counter that, though, how do we counter that?
Well,
that's a huge question. How do we counter that?
It really is. It's a big question. Anybody can chime in, but what I try to do a lot of times, because ironically, I have more younger clients than I have people in my generation, because they're still thirsty for some understanding those answers why. And I want to know about that technology, because I continue to say about the aging process, it's been the same. When we get to be 80, our cell phones are going to do some things that are going to be so magical that we're not going to even want to understand it at an age that, we may be like, I don't want to deal with it, but we're going to have to. So I'm looking at partnering with younger people. Teach me something. It gets them off guard sometimes, where then once they teach me, then I can slide some common sense things in that I know. So I think we're going to be challenged. There's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to adapt to, but at the same time, they're going to be moving in light years faster than us, because they have no fear when it comes to this World Wide Web. And I sometimes get afraid to hit the enter button because I don't want to break the computer. But, in the end, we got to figure this thing out, and that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Yeah. Now,
hey, D, you on?
Yeah, hey, just real quick. I had to take on the mantra of just, and I don't know if you guys have heard it before, but assume nothing, teach everything. Assume nothing, teach everything. Assume nothing, teach everything. I'm just saying it, I'm just used to saying it to my students. But at one point, I assumed that they knew how to use the phones for their benefit. You see what I'm saying? And it got to the point where I think I was teaching like a freshman seminar class, and I was just trying to teach them life lesson stuff, and I had a workbook form that I made for the students. I have a workbook. It's called the Young Student Athlete Handbook. Just talking about life lessons for students and so forth. And I assumed that they knew some of this stuff, so I had to kind of stop myself and go back and literally teach them how to enter this stuff into Google, YouTube, whatever it was, these platforms that they can learn from, because to my surprise, they just did not know. And I hate to say it, they even probably a couple weeks ago, my daughter, came to me with something. My daughter came to me with something, and I looked at her, and here I am, educator and this and that. And I'm like, man, my daughter, I guess she should know. But she did not. So I had to kind of humble myself and say, you know what, whoa, let's take this back. Let's teach her how to do this. So I got her, and I'm sorry. I got her, and I had to, let her know, no, let's go look up the words specific words in your search so that you can, find out what it is that you might need, So it's one of those things, hopefully, if you guys already aren't doing it, we can go back to our communities, go back to our kids, go back to the ones that we work with, and, use that black male voice and be specific with these guys, man. Mm-hmm. Be as specific as possible, because, again, just like Mr. Moore was saying, a lot of these young men, they don't hear men in the school systems. Like you said, it's 1% male, and even less black male at that. I hate to say it, I come from a household, and I love my mother, but it was one of those things after my parents divorced. Don't you listen to your father? He doesn't know what he's talking about. Da, 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 da. And I mean, you just keep hearing that, and you're kind of like, well, maybe all men are like that. Maybe I shouldn't trust them, And it was one of those things where, as I was coming up, I had to kind of reteach myself, like, no, what men say is valuable, whether it be men in the church, whether it be men on the coaching field, and So it was one of those things where, by God's grace, I pulled myself out of that wormhole of, no, you can't listen to men. No, don't listen to black men. Their voices aren't, reasonable. So, it's just one of those things, gentlemen.
I think it's important. We've talked.
I want to apologize. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's important. We've talked about this before on the other panels of being transparent, to show these kids that I'm not just a business owner and a trainer and a coach, but show them the levels of who you are. You can be a coach, you can be a dad, you can be a tech guru, you can be a pastor, you can be all those different levels thinking outside the box. One black male or one male can always have an asset outside of what he focuses on. Like, you can be an author. Many of you guys are authors. You can be in finance. We have to show these kids that we're just not one-dimensional. We can show them that, I may be focused on training and athletics, but you can step aside and be a successful author. You can be a successful preacher. You can do all these different things and step outside the box and grow. I think they see so many things in the media as athletes, and we said musicians, that they just get so much tunnel vision and focus on the message they get from there. But if we open up that broad spectrum of education and kind of show them the transparency of what a man can be, they'll learn those things step by step and start broadening their horizons and going to different places.
I have and I apologize for the computer delay and things like that that's going on my end. But I have a specific person in my mind. I'm not going to use his particular name, but coming out of prison, coming out of jail, not feeling like, and in his 20s. So that means somehow our generation did not see him early enough to catch him before he went in. But now we see him as they come out.
I think he froze
Do
again.
you think our approaches should be different? Should we apologize as older black men saying, listen, young blood, sorry you got missed, but now I see you? You think we should apologize?
I personally do not. I think that having choice and free will is important for men. And the thing I preach is representation matters. I say that 20,000 times.
Absolutely.
Worked in 3 districts, 2 of which I was the only black teacher there, let alone black male English teacher. So you see how that goes. But I feel that it is our duty to saturate whatever market there is with us. And I also always talk about sacrifice. And Doc, you've always heard me say that. It's sacrifice. It's the difference between a moment and a movement. But enough of us sacrifice. I'll use me as an example. So why would I run for city council? Why? I got 4 kids. I got a job. I got too many things to do. But I know that when Chad's daughter walks down the street, or when my daughter walks down the street, they can look and see that, hey, there's somebody there. Wow. And I may not have a conversation with them. I will try my best, but I may not have a conversation with them. So if you look at the demographics of the market, sports is saturated with black males. Entertainment is saturated with black males. Teaching is not. And that's something that we have. That's not really something that we have to apologize for, but that's we got to swallow that pill that, some of us failed in these certain markets to saturate and to get to those young black males. But I'd also like to say one other thing, because I don't talk much, but when I do, I talk too much. When we look at, and I said this before, when we look at black males, when we look at us, just think back to how many male influences, not only black, most of us have had a lot of black influences, but think of how many we've had. And think of the paths that we went down and how many people looked at us or we looked up to them and said, you know what, I can do that. And, that's just what I'm preaching here. Representation matters. We want change. We need to start saturating some markets.
Dr. Woods, if I may.
Go ahead.
I want to just chime in, and I apologize. This is so good because the subtitle of our book is called Revitalization, Education, and Representation. And I'm going to say this because I want to piggyback off of Dr. Woods, and all of you guys have just hit all these points. When we were thinking about this anthology, we needed to make sure that we go back to our communities and revitalize our communities, and it all starts with us at home. We know that a lot of, like if you take Washington, D.C. right now, Southeast, they have gentrified that entire area in Southeast D.C. They have disenfranchised black families and sent them to Northern Virginia where they can't even come back to where they live. With that being said, myself and Stephen LeBroy were both from Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana was the murder capital of the world when I grew up as a teenager for 7 years in a row. 7 years in a row where I grew up was the murder capital of the world. So Steve and I take our business back home to revitalize our community back in Gary. We did fundraisers for some of the mayors, but holding workshops. So that revitalization is key to go back to our communities where we grew up. Then the education. A good friend of mine talks about what Dr. Woods is talking about. Education is the new sport. I'm telling my 3 boys that it's okay to be an attorney, a judge, or a school teacher, not an athlete. Education. So the 3 points I'm hitting here is revitalization, education, and representation. The subtitle of When Men Lean In, We All Win. So there's the education piece. I'm stressing this to my 3 boys every day. Go to college. There's certain colleges that will give you a full ride if you're left-handed, right-handed, depending, and if you go back and be a school teacher in certain counties. Benedict College in South Carolina will give you a full ride if you give them, if you go there and you're a black male, right? But you got to go back to the school system and give them 6 years. Last point is representation. We must be, all of you all are doing it, and we're using our platform to do it. D talks about it. Being present in the household, being present in corporate America, and being present in the community. And those are the 3 things that I'm hearing, and that's why the subtitle of this book, Revitalization, Education, and Representation. And all of you all are saying that. So I just wanted to let you all know that's confirmation that this book is amazing, because that's the things that we took away that needed to be a part of each of the brothers' chapters here.
So Dr. White, the question is sometimes is, how do we get these kids? Are the books for us or the books for the kids? Because we still, I know, I ask black men, how are you helping mentoring kids? Now, I don't got time for that. And I'll let that go, because this is just a pass-by conversation I have with someone at J.C. Penney. Because I think we all need to pitch in, period.
I want to jump in on that question, Dr. Dyer. So, the book is for young black males and young men and children. But how are they going to get it?
Yeah.
Through the mothers, the women, the wives, because they are the consumers, right? If something comes into my house, my wife bought it. So we got to transfer. And if you look at Dr. White's, the people who follow Dr. White, it's predominantly women. So we got to get the book into their hands.
Where's it going when you die?
Right? And they will say, hey, baby, here's this great book I want you to read. Like if a young woman and she's involved with a young man who's not really who she wants him to be,
right,
and he may not know how to be that, because we have so many men who don't grow up with fathers, they don't truly know how to be a man. So
right,
we have to get the book into the women's hands and have them give them to their significant other to read, or read it to their children, or even for them to read, because they don't even know what a man is. We have so many young girls who have no clue what a man is. If a man doesn't make you feel good about yourself, then he ain't the man for you. But I counsel tons of young women who will accept anything because they don't even know what a young man should be or how a man should behave. So I think at this point, the women are our actual target to trickle it down to the men.
And there's some young men who are just angry at the fathers not being there for them. They're still holding a lot of trauma on that. They're just angry that they did not have that. And so now they need to get over that trauma and work through that trauma and understand what that trauma is doing to them, and learning how to forgive whoever that father was not, or what they wanted him to be or could not be for whatever reason. We have to move forward, and that's a trauma. That's a trauma that I know I talk to young men about also.
Exactly. Thank God for that, because like with me, I was a father at 15, but I didn't make any excuses about not showing up to a doctor's appointments, things of that nature. I would miss school, miss class to go to my kids' doctor's appointments. You know what I mean? I still finished high school, went to the military, but I never made excuses of why I wasn't in a kid's life. And I think I see a lot of guys continue to make excuses. Well, she don't let me see the kid. She don't do this, da-da-da-da. And I'm like, you have just as big as right. You just have to go to the court and establish those rights. And a lot of us, we run from the court system, but sometimes it can work in your favor when you a male trying to be there. You know what I mean? And a lot of us, we get caught up in the stigma of, or it's not, the system isn't built for us. It's not in a sense, but until you try to work the system and try to get involved in it and be in your kid's life, yeah, it's not going to work for you, because child support will wear you out. But like you said, they see you making an effort, visitation, establishing visitation, things of that sort. As soon as the baby comes into this earth, go ahead and establish that visitation. Don't wait till they're 10, 11, 12, 13, then be like, oh, I want to be in a kid's life. That doesn't work. You know what I mean? You got to start from the time the baby is here and you hold that baby looking in their eyes. You got to be there from that point on and stop making excuses. And that's me.
Also, I want to add to your original question, should we apologize? And I say yes. I say yes. Probably not this group of men, but for a lot of black men, we fail as leaders. We fail as looking at our life as a ministry. So when we fail as leaders and we're not purpose-driven, then we have a different mindset. Some of us, not us, but some of black men, we grow, we go to college, we get these MBAs, we get some toys. Now we don't want to reach back. So I think we have failed this generation. And that's what, and then we so miseducated that we're looking at our own black men just like the white man. Mm-hmm. I mean, now I'm talking about value. How do black men value other black men?
Yeah.
So, and it's almost like a generational curse. I just stopped there. It's like we have to break that generational curse, and we need a lead.
Yeah.
I just want to say this, guys, and I may have.
You're right about
that. Dr. Dyer, you mentioned how did the youth get the books? Remember that, right? Dr. Dyer, still there? You got? Yeah, he froze up.
There. Just keep going.
Right. So, about an hour before this meeting, I was talking with Wes, who's on now my executive team at my mastermind group, to piggyback off what Gerald said, and is that we are getting ready to write a proposal to the superintendent and the county executive in the state of Maryland and my county to get the school board to purchase When Men Lean In, We All Win. And I'm going to push that because those books need to be in the classrooms. They need to be in the library. So that's one way that we're going to get these books out to our youth. Secondly, I wanted to state that, Gerald, you so on point. I've sold 30 books, and just about all of them, my son, my oldest son, he bought 2. But the other sales came from black women, and they said that they couldn't wait to give it to their brothers, some who have been in and out of jail, incarcerated, due to, systemic racism, things of that nature. So you all are on point. The 30 books that I've sold, less than the 2 with my son, have went to African-American women who are donating the books to their brothers, their fathers, and their sons. So I'm so in agreement, but we are, and I love all these brothers on this panel, that we're doing our job to get public officials and school systems to purchase these books to get them in classrooms. Because as you all know, this is the impressed educators. They've taken Black history and put up underneath American history, let alone in my county, the curriculum is not mandatory. Like, at least we all got Black history education coming up as African-American males, where in certain counties where I've lived, they don't even teach Black history. So this book and certain Black programs are the only curriculums that our Black African-American students are getting. So working with Wes and some other folks to get these books into schools as well. That's what I wanted to add. So sorry about that, everybody.
No, and again, I understand that people have things going on, but off and on, we know that the system has suppressed us. We know that there's systemic racism. This is just something that is factual to me. You can admit that you didn't believe it was factual to you, but to me, I totally admit that it has been. But it seems now young kids don't even know what systemic racism is, because that's all they see is the construct of the system.
So I actually a lot of when I'm talking to young boys in the programs in the schools that I go to, Chad said something and Mr. McCarver said something that kind of struck with me, right? So growing up for me, I hit every negative stereotype of the young black male. By 12, I had my first police encounter. By 14, I got expelled from school. At 15, I did the Scared Straight program in Rochester, New York. At 17, I had my first child. At 17 and 3 months, I had sole custody of that child, right? So I hit every negative stereotype. Chad mentioned something about black men are not monolithic, right? I was a star athlete. They praised me for that. But coming out of 8th grade, when I got expelled from school, the only reason I didn't get sent to alternative school, because it just so happened that the superintendent was in my expulsion meeting and said, we are not going to expel a young man who is testing at 12th year, 10th month, coming out of 8th grade. So I virtually was testing out of school coming out of the 8th grade. But there was no accolades for that. Like, my mother didn't even know that. Like, my mother didn't even know that on my New York State test that I was testing that high. So when we look at the systems that are put in place and you know that are suppressing us, so when I got into corporate America, I resigned my first salary job on day one because my father came home and every day he said, the man. So I had an internship working with 2 white male counterparts, and they offered us jobs. On day one, where we got our documentation package, those 2 white males, I went out to celebrate our new jobs. We're going to be working together for a long time, right? So I thought. There was an engineering aptitude test that had to be taken to determine where you would be in the company. So as I talked to these young my white male counterparts, they wasn't on white code, so they didn't know that they wasn't supposed to talk about their scores. But it turns out I scored 20 points higher than both of them. They became engineers. I became a senior technician. The difference in that in salary was $15,000. Additional week of vacation. So I resigned that job on day one, right? But what that taught me is day one that I was never going to fit in corporate America. So from that point, I've spent all my time, I got to go back and find where I fit. And where I fit is working with young black males in sports. I actually taught for 2 years. I went back into the school system because I'm a don't talk about it, be about it person. So it just so happened I was working out with the football team. I went to a vocational school. Athletic director was like, Gerald, you can come back here and teach electronics in our school. And I did. But all I talk about is the systems that will be put in place. Nothing will be fair, right? But our young kids today, that's my children's all the time. It's not fair. It's not fair. Life ain't going to be fair. Right. We still gonna have to be twice as good, you know, just to get level, right? But at the same time, we still have to teach that these systems are in place and how to navigate them. We do a lot of talking about them. Right. How do we navigate them? Like in corporate America, I knew my glass ceiling was coming, right? And once I hit it, how do I navigate that now? I can go into depression. Right? Oh, they're not going to let me do this. They're not going to let me do that. How do we navigate that? And that's the question. We have to teach how to navigate those systems and continue to build.
That's real talk. That's real talk right there. Because let me just say, first of all, when you were like Rochester, New York, since you got on, I'm like, God, he looked familiar. But yeah, I got it. But you hit the nail on the head. I spoke to a group of teachers where I had, so North Dakota, homogenous, lots of whites, lots of Caucasians, okay. I had to speak to a group of educators about choices that blacks have to make as young as 6, as young as 5. And it's one of like assimilation or non-conformity. And this is a thing with me. And when I talk to young black males, I say, look, you can choose one or the other. There's positives and negatives to both. There's consequences, positive and negatives to both. But you have to choose one. And the fact that, when you say you scored so high on the test just speaks to, you know, which side did you pick at the time, and those educators being able to recognize that you made a choice, but you still got it up here. It doesn't take away from what you had up here. You just made a choice. And so that's something that I think a lot of in the educational field and even in the private industry that they're dealing with. Don't tell your score because it might be higher, and we had these preconceived notions about what he's going to do or how he's going to perform. And I think, you know, whether it's from racism, bigotry, or whatever, we have a group of leaders in these industries that have already used these preconceived notions to place us in spots. Right. And I told these people, I said, look, yes, I am Dr. David Woods, but I bump bass in my car all the time. I like Jordan 1s, and I'm not too far removed from these folks because I was hanging around these people. Like, I'm friends with killers and murderers and all this.
Yes.
That goes to Chad's point. We are not monolithic. That's the beauty of being black. But our leaders have to recognize that.
But they're not. They will never recognize that. They will always try to put us in a box. And I think that's what is so tough because when you guys said before that we have not saturated the schools. And so they don't see us. And until we are in the schools and they see us out, they when we're bumping our bass and we're listening to our music or when we're doing whatever, they don't know what's inside, right? They only see that visual, and they still don't know until we let them know.
Right. Wes, I'm gonna call Wes out because I like the way he talks. He always has that other side. So I'm gonna divert.
Dave, my technology has me a little bit off kilter today, but I'm actually on my phone versus my iPad. But no, they're absolutely right. We're not a monolithic, type of people, and it's kind of hard to get other folks to kind of recognize that, but the thing is, I mean, with us knowing it, I think, that's a good enough start. There are going to be these conditions within our culture, but it's for us to, find ways to come together. But the one thing, like I've always said, regardless of what we may think or what direction that we may be looking to go, as a culture, as a race, I would hope that we would have enough sense that we would not look to do harm, to one another in that aspect.
But I think we sabotage ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, do we sabotage it literally on purpose or without thought? Sometimes
I think they do it. I think they do it without thought. Because I just don't think they're always 100% consciously aware. Because some of it is environmentally driven,
right.
And that's the one thing. They're not thinking about, what's happening over here on your left or what's happening over on their right. They're just dealing with what they're in right then and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I talk to young brothers on what y'all just said, right? So you have over here you have thought, and then in the middle we process those thoughts, and then there's the action from your process, right?
Correct.
Right now we got young brothers going from thought to action.
Right.
That's why you can shoot somebody for stepping on your shoes, right? Because you went from thought to action. So this whole the process of how to think things out, like Wes said, depending on where you grow up, that's going to determine a lot of how you think and how short that process is before you act, right? So how do we get back to that? So I talk to I do examples. You can go talk to young black men. If I was talking to some brothers that had done some time, I would go on the limb and say about 80% of the brothers in jail would not be there if the act that they took to get them there was some thought process in between before thought to action, right?
Right.
So there has to be, this thought process that a lot of kids in the inner city, depending on the system in the area, that the thinking process has been eliminated, and they just out there. They just acting on whatever stimulus is there, and there is no thought.
Well, Gerald, because I teach brain science and how and why thoughts affect the body and how it affects your body, right? So even in the brain science, we're not teaching. The kids are so small in the homes, they're not getting enough healthy cognition development. So because of that, then the environment starts to create so the environment's creating the child. So in the brain, your oldest part of your brain now puts it into survival, pretty much shelter, food. How do I get out? How do I get in? And how do I get by? And that's the programming it stays on, and all of a sudden it finds itself to 20x, and they're like, now they're just slipping and sliding by, and until they get caught. Right. Whatever that catch is, whether we catch it, whether it gets caught, whether they get caught, something catches them, and that Gerald, that's what you're talking about. Then it goes right into this action, and that action has always been programmed because we never got to them. And it doesn't go back to like what Dee said, what you guys said. We're just not in those schools. So now now that we're not in the schools, okay, we don't have enough black teachers. Thanks, Dee. Thanks, Davey. Thanks for being in the schools. But we don't have enough black teachers in the schools, but we have enough black men outside the schools who aren't going to the schools.
Mm-hmm. But schools don't also do a good job fostering relationships with men to come into the school. So any teacher I get a chance to talk to that, so I went through K through 12 without having a black male educator. And I went to Norfolk State, was the first time I had a black male educator, right? So when I go to the schools and I'm talking to teachers, I'm like, yo, there's men in the community that I think at least once a quarter, you should invite a black businessman to come speak about something. And they'll come. Now, if you don't put the effort in, they're not coming. Right. But you can reach out to the community. There's a community center within the vicinity of every school where they can at least have one of those recreation directors come in and just show themselves to black boys or black kids. The school in general, because even white kids need to see black men because they need to get over the fear that their parents have instilled in them that black men are dangerous.
But they don't want to. That's what we also have to know. They don't want us to go to those schools and talk to those kids. That's why we have to start our organizations. That's why we have to do so many other things to get to our black children.
Hey, Paul, just to touch base on that, we as black men, we don't need the school. We don't need those other places. We can create our own venues. So one of the greatest things that I have at my gym is I can do whatever I want. I've created a bike night for riders to come and meet different people in the community, from black to white, Hispanic, Native American. I've created event nights for fight nights on UFC so the kids can come in and meet other kids in the area they've never met in the region. We can create our own venues and sites. My parking lot, I open it up for the rib man. He comes down, everybody comes and gets his ribs, and they meet new people based on different types of food that's coming. So if you have a venue like a community center, Dave knows this too, he brings his athletes over there and meet different things and talk about different topics. You can use those venues or avenues as a parking lot. My buildings you can rent out for events and create those own events that you can help the community. We don't need the school districts. If they're not going to let us in and see our representation, let's make our own venues.
Right. Yeah. That's
Good point. Good point.
Good point.
That's what I'm doing, Chad.
I mean, I know we're in a political season, and this is not a political. Do you think we black people should have their own political party?
Absolutely. So I think so on that, right? So we got the Diddy's of the world and the Ice Cubes of the world who say, the time is now to create this political party. It's definitely a need. But if you go back to the time of the Million Man March, what year was the Million Man March?
92, I believe.
92. The Nation of Islam came up with this document of doctrine which had everything that black people should do in relation to what should be in a black political party, right? And I think we put too much effort in the voting of the presidents and not the voting of our local representation, right? That's where it all has to go. If you want stuff done in your community, it has nothing to do with the president. But as a collective...
But check it out, Joe. You know how many people know civics?
But that's the thing. So community-wise, us men, we got to go in and teach that too. Mm-hmm. Because in the book when men lean in, like I think the title of my chapter is, I believe that the future of the black family totally falls on the shoulders of black men.
Now, I just heard this recently, and it falls right to your point. Black women. Now, I heard this from the black woman source in my house. My wife. She says they've been holding it down forever, and they're tired. Black men need to take their role. So, again, is that an apology we owe, or is that something we didn't see?
You know what? You know what's bigger than the apology? And I think most women will tell you this. The work.
The work.
Show me the work.
The work, yeah.
Show me the work, and I can get over the apology.
Okay.
All right.
But that's where I think we run into a problem, because I think like with my father and probably his father, they were just all kind of conditioned so you get a job, you take care of your family, but they weren't given the skills just to be the father. They can be the disciplinarian, go your dad and everything, because you're getting ready to get it, but the mother was still doing somewhat of the raising and the whole entire bit while just going out and having that job, where we have to retool the way that black men think about families and everything, what their role is in that aspect. Like I said, within our generation, I think we get it, but we're like that first generation removed in that aspect. And it's what we teach our own children as far as moving forward, as far as what is a good father and what's going to be needed. And I think that will actually give the relief to the women that they're, what they're asking for, Dr. Dyer.
I totally agree. And I'll take it one step further. When we have our agenda, right? And we got to have people who agree with our agenda, what that is, whatever that is. And I agree with Gerald. It has to start on the city level. See, what a lot of people don't understand is that, and going back to the representation matters thing, when we have an agenda and we run for office, if we lose, that agenda is still out there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So we always say, I ain't gonna do that. I don't have a chance of winning. I don't know. When I ran, I did not think I had a chance of winning. To this day, shocking. They voted a brother in office in North Dakota.
Dude, I'm coming to visit just because of that.
Yeah, it was like, whoa. But I went in because I saw a measure that wanted to get rid of wards because some people aren't running in those wards and they're going unopposed. First thing I thought about was, Well, what if that happened in Nyack, New York? What if that happened in New York City? They got rid of like the war. I mean, 4 people on the same street can be running the town.
Right.
So that's not something that's on, this group, my town. That's not something that's on their radar. They can't pull from those outside experiences. So I just think the fact that someone feels very passionate about something, they need to run to get that out there, because that's how the political process is. And maybe you will have enough footing, you'll get enough following, well, you can get in an office and possibly make some changes. But just the first step of putting yourself out there, that sacrifice, it's big. It's a huge sacrifice, but it's worth it.
Like, and I'm not a historian by any means, but I was raised that I should vote Democrat because I come from a city where people are poor, and allegedly the Democrats supposed to help poor people, right? So the basis of my thought process for a long time was I vote Democrat because my mother said so, and because the Democrats is going to hurt poor people. But when we look at us black people as a political party, our party should dictate where we go because we're under one agenda, whether that be Republican or Democrat, right? And then we can hold those people accountable as a party, because if you're going to, and then it's going to be based on, not only the presidential election, that agenda from city to city, from representative to representative. If this representative in D.C. is not following the policies that we set out in our black political party, then that person has to go, right? And us as a unit.
So here's about the black. Is there a way does it matter that a non-black person will call the black political party racist?
Oh, it doesn't matter. They're going to call us racist anyway.
Right. So that's what I was going to say. It shouldn't matter what they call us, because they call us that anyway.
Right.
And just because they don't recognize, or now here's the thing, with a black political party, we know that these other 2 parties are never going to acknowledge it, right?
Right. But
that's okay, because we're after the agenda and not so much the forming of the idea of the party.
Right. So I think there's some education that needs to happen to white people, right? So typically, there's more white people on welfare than black people, just because there's more of them.
Right.
So a lot of the things that black people will be fighting for would also help poor white people. And a lot of poor white people vote against their actual agenda because they just want to be white. We got to vote white, which is actually against the needs for them.
Exactly.
So I think, we have to put some collective economics behind us to kind of educate some poor white folks. We gotta put some money in some commercials to say, yo, poor white folks, Trump, Trump ain't good for y'all. He look like y'all, but he not good for y'all economically
Trump ain't good for
or
nobody.
in his politics.
Trump cares about Trump.
Exactly.
That is it. That is it.
Yeah. We got 10 days, and we'll see how this happens, or we'll say 9 days.
Well, so we probably won't have a conversation until after election, so I'll say that. So we're going to have this next meeting after election. But they've already immobilized the National Guard for the in case. They've already been put on alert. How do you guys feel about that?
In case,
So
I think it's unnecessary, but it's what it is,
You know what? At this state of America, depending on where you live, right? So in Rochester, New York, some of our people are not. It's Christmas time. I think some of our people are gonna take the opportunity to go Christmas shopping.
Because I look at Minneapolis and I think that same thing. I look at LA and I think that same thing. I look at Chicago, and it's putting people on notice is what it is. And right, wrong, or indifferent, that's what it is. He wants to activate the National Guard to put everybody on notice. This is what's going to happen, and you guys are going to fall in line, because it wasn't just blacks that were out there looting. I mean, it was everybody that was out there taking.
And I think on both sides, right? So I can see on a Democratic win, I could see the shotgun toting white folks taken to the street.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a much more dangerous situation.
Yeah. Because they will never go to jail.
Right.
Nope.
At least, and how about this? For a black man like me, I don't think they'll be going to jail. Some might, but I don't think they will.
No.
I don't think they will.
Nope.
Yeah, I agree. I think, just like the young man up there in Minneapolis, the kid who shot 3 people and just...
Right, was just walking the street.
Right. Water, with other counterparts.
He's still alive.
Yeah.
They probably actually gave him an apology.
Well, they took that one guy. Remember when they took him out to eat?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's the guy.
Killing Reed, right?
That's the guy.
Yep.
I actually personally know the son of that minister that was shot by Rube. He's a speaker. I'll put his name out there because he's a dang good speaker. Chris Singleton. Amazing brother. I mean, amazing what he has done with the situation that he was given, and he has to look at that every day. And he still goes out and he mentors and he travels the country. I mean, just an amazing person. But we know, because as an English teacher, one of the hardest things that I have to do is teach literature, and sometimes not teach the basis for that literature. A lot of the literature is out there, so it tells us what the plan is.
Yeah.
And it tells us how, certain documents were, put there so they can bring down black men. And, presidents have come out and said, hey, if I can get poor whites to believe that they are higher than blacks, then I can do anything I want to.
I guess.
That is in the literature. You know what I mean? So there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, if we just go back and start reading, and there goes that education piece as well. Like if we can put those things in people's hands, where that can educate them, the civics will come. Because I tell my students, I tell my seniors, because they have principles of democracy as a class as well, I say, you know what? My job as an English teacher and as a black man is to make you question that teacher over there and make you question those documents. So I'm going to give you this literature, and I want you to be able to tie it to what you're getting in that class and then question it. Because that's the only way we're going to get ahead here.
Our music that these young kids are listening to, the trap, that this music they call trap music. I first of all, I think it's not even music, and I love hip hop, but trap, I don't know what the hell that is. Yeah, and so are these lyrics? I believe these lyrics are hurting our black boys specifically. I think they're also hurting our black young women. women specifically because of the. But there has always been elusive lyrics throughout history. Is it just more so now, or is it just something we're hyper-focused on?
So I think it's both. So you said something earlier about how the mind works, right?
Right.
So we have our conscious mind and we have our subconscious mind, right? How do we program our subconscious mind? Repetition, right? So if the lyrics that I'm hearing that's programming my subconscious mind is negative in nature, right, then it's the deterioration of that individual because their thought process, they're only thinking in this limited mindset. But because we have our technology, like for us, we had the radio, we had Walkmans and stuff, but we didn't have it all the time. These kids now can walk in school with earbuds in and nobody say anything. Right? So it's
Absolutely.
just the constant programming. Mm-hmm. You know, the constant programming of negative, and not only do they get the lyrics, they have the negative imagery right there at hand because they watching the music and the video at the same time on rotation. Kill, 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 die, 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 kill, 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 bitch, bitch, bitch. Right? So how do you, what do you do with that?
I'm gonna put something out there because I'm gonna play the devil's advocate because I love that.
Me too. I'm a DJ.
So I have passed every Grand Theft Auto game known to man. I'm gonna put this out here. I like WAP. I think it's catchy. I like it. I bump it until I turn on my street, and then the kids can hear it, and then I gotta turn it down. I bump it, right? Okay. So with that all being said, I mean I'm still here, and I know that I may be the exception and not the rule. I understand that, but what I also know is when I was very fortunate enough to grow up with a mother and a father in the house, and so. When I played Grand Theft Auto, I mean, Rosie Woods also had a strong fist. So I knew that you don't treat women that way. Mm-hmm. And David Wood Sr. kind of, he was kind of strong too, and I didn't want to mess that up. So is it what's out there? Because like you said, Dr. Dyer, every generation had it. So is it what's out there, or is it that it is not being there's not enough people in the child's life to scope what is reality and what isn't?
I think that's it.
That's it.
I think that's a because back in the day, we had to have a parent or someone to go to the record store to get the unedited versions, or have a big brother or cousin to get it for us. And in turn, they had to have money. So accessibility now, they just go to YouTube or what have you, any of these other platforms, just download it and listen to it. So the accessibility is a lot, is easier now. And then, like you said, parents working 12-hour, 16-hour shifts. And like you said, the front line workers just through the COVID thing. So they're home all day now. You know what I'm saying? Front line workers are working, and their kids home. You don't know what they're watching. You know what type of game they're playing. So it's like the accessibility and the monitoring of those lyrics and things of that nature. So it's a little bit of both.
I think we're all old enough to remember when the B word was actually swearing and could not be played on the radio. Right.
Yeah.
But now when even the music on the radio, right, we all old enough to remember when the parental advisory sticker came across on records too.
Uncle Luke.
Right, exactly.
Uncle Luke.
Listen, I bought the Throw the D record in Georgia at 14. My cousins took me to this little juke joint, and I brought it back to New York and was rocking. So there is. So like Dr. Wood said, if you don't have a filter at home, right? You don't have a filter at home, or some solid, stable mindset that somebody's kind of still keeping you focused. Mm-hmm. What is there to keep you focused? Like, when we were coming up on NWA and Ice Cube and Uncle Luke, right? There was still it wasn't like with the whole NWA thing, right? I didn't look at that as, yo, Drill, you need to go get an AK and shoot a couple jokers up.
No.
Like, I looked at that as a look in the mirror of this is what's going on out in L.A. I wasn't on West Coast. But it was a look in the mirror of what's going on in L.A., not something that I should actually act out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, man, we got a long way to go.
Yeah. I think back in that time too, we had a differentiation of how we took music as well. So you're listening to something that gets you kind of in a mellow mood and you can study, or it gets you amped and you can go to the weight room. We had the responsibility to choose what that music made us act out or do. So I used to love to listen to heavy metal or rap before games and get out there and just get rocking. Or if I was studying, I'd throw on some classical music and do some things. So I think the kids have to understand, too, what the purpose of entertainment and music and the things we see in the media give us the expectation to do. Because like you said, you didn't listen to NWA and grab an AK and get out there and spreading everywhere. Right. But you did learn the message because in the lyrics, they told a story what was going on in that day. And I think kids don't see the story. And I also think that the music today doesn't tell a story.
Not a lot of storytelling.
That's what I was going to say.
Not a lot of storytelling.
Not storytelling.
Yeah. It's just a bunch of mumbling, and then you get a few curse words here and there, and then the kids start kind of acting in that unorthodox way. We got messages from Diggable Planets and all these different artists that took music as art. But today I think music is just a sense of entertainment, but there's not a message behind it anymore. There's some artists that still do that, but not many. They're just getting that track to make that money and then go to the next level.
So again, but when we're going back to is mentoring men, is black mentoring men, these young artists are the black young artists. Is capitalism? Can capitalism ever be good for a community?
If it's bringing something into the community, I think. But if it's kind of exploiting and so forth, then no. I don't know.
It bothers me that people are only trying to get their money and they don't care who they hurt and how they get it.
True.
Exactly. Yep.
We're all in. Most of those people are in survival mode. I mean,
right.
A lot of that time. I mean, it's what Cheryl talked about. Is what you said, Dr. Dyer. I mean, when you look at some of those lyrics, and when you look at some of those artists, it's important to look at the background. And some of those artists and some of these athletes are nothing to something. You know what I mean? So when you give them that much money, and that money equals clout, and that clout gives them a platform, capitalism requires a higher level thinking. It requires knowing that you have a responsibility. That's what, if you're a capitalist, you know you have a responsibility.
Right.
But what we're seeing here, I mean, it is capitalism,
but it isn't.
We're missing the responsibility piece. Whereas, you know how hard it is to tell when a student asks me who my favorite rap artist. You listen to rap? Yeah, I listen to rap. Who's your favorite artist? Most Def. What? Most who?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Whoa. And then I play them God. Like, this is how you get God. And they're like, wow. And I'm like, dude, he's telling a story about surviving with money now.
Right.
You got to understand. So when you're looking, okay, I'm going to take a little time. I'm sorry for doing this. My wife is Caucasian. One day, she talked about how land was given to her family. And it's funny because I just found out, where my tree is. I just found that out. Auburn, Alabama. Go figure. So when her parents were given land, my parents had to go to the military to get their comeuppance. You know what I mean? Right. And so that right there, so when I talked about rags to riches, you give people money, and now there's a stage within everyone where it's like that flashy stage, right? Okay, we're going to flash. All right, here's the flashy stage. So some of these artists and some of these athletes are in this flashy stage, and they don't know the responsibility of having that money, proper investing, going back to communities, saying thank you to whoever brought you up. They don't quite understand that yet because they're not there. They came from a lower rung, and now all of a sudden they have clout, they have followers, they have money, but they don't have that responsibility to who got them there, their community, and things like that. And at a later time, they tend to learn that, but they are no better than me living paycheck to paycheck because they're still in that flashy stage.
They're
no bet. Yeah, he makes $20 million, but he spends like $19.99 of the money trying to flash it. So it's just there's a discrepancy there that also needs to be.
But isn't that what they want? Isn't that what the media and right. Those guys is giving those guys the money? Isn't that what they want? Because they're controlling the narrative in our communities with those guys.
Which is proven by LeBron James. What happened when LeBron James stepped out of line? Oh, we got a problem now.
Shut up and dribble.
You're right.
He's an uppity one.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. So they want to put us back in check. As soon as we start trying to do positive, they said, nah, we can't have this.
Yeah.
We're going to promote these other guys, these little babies and the babies and all these other guys to the front line to overshadow LeBron James. The same time LeBron James was opening school, I think somebody shot somebody. The baby shooting somebody was the headline, not LeBron James opening school. You know what I'm saying? They want to control. And I think they fall into those, they fall into that cycle. And like I said, they have the money, and they don't care about us. You know what I mean? The regular people. Oh, they know, like you said, they know about the flash. They want the rollies. They want the expensive cars. But they care less about us, and the young people that they affect. But like you said, the young people don't see it because all they see is the flash. And just like it goes back to our neighborhoods. It's just like with the drug dealers back in the day. All they saw was the flash of the drug. They didn't see the football coaches. They didn't care about the guy that was working at the grills, the guys that were, working under the cars. All they saw was the guys ride down the street with the Benz, with the gold chains, and had the car full of women. So that's why I said it's like it's a continuous cycle. That's how they want to keep us mentally enslaved with those cycles, with those flashy rhetorics and everything, because then they know they can continue to control us and control our narrative through the ages and through the years.
We definitely got to get out of the slave mentality thinking, and that's what's keeping us enslaved is the slave mentality thinking. I do want to cut this off, let you guys enjoy your Saturday, and the newly married, again, happily married, Gerald. Welcome to the married group.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Second time.
Thank you for listening to Bridges Live, and I'm Dr. Paul. If you ever want to join any of my shows, just please contact me at drpaulholisticscience.com or drpaulwdyer@gmail.com. I wish you all a blessed and happy day, and I will talk to you later. Thank you again for all my sponsors and the people who listen and the people who share. Namaste.